Ajmal Perfumes has been making the UAE and the world smell good for 75 years. The late Haji Ajmal Ali, previously a farmer by trade, started the business in 1951 in Mumbai. Mr. Ajmal Ali soon saw the opportunity to expand in the early years of the UAE and opened Ajmal's first shop in Murshid Bazaar in Dubai in 1976. Abdulla Ajmal, the grandson of the company's founder, has been steering the family business as CEO since 2023. A business that has now grown into an international fragrance powerhouse that exports to over 45 countries worldwide with a portfolio of over 300 scents and 240 shops. Hello and welcome to Homegrown DXB, the show taking you inside the lives of the people changing yours right here in Dubai. I'm your host, Amar Bati. And I'm delighted to have with me today Abdullah Ajmal, CEO of the Ajmal Group. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Omar.
Well, I mean, Ajmal is certainly a name that I think has become synonymous with Dubai, right? A 75-year legacy, much more than 30, 75-year legacy, third generation in your case. What does it feel like, I guess, to carry on a business that's been around so long, that's been both in the region and obviously in the UAE for so many years, to have all that responsibility and that history associated with it?
So, yes, it's a huge responsibility. People from the outside would be like, wow, it seems so daunting. It is, because you have to not only, you're stepping into really big shoes, but you need to make the shoes bigger for the next generation. But at the same time, it's a huge amount of pride because you've now been given the mantle to handle something that started from absolutely nothing. My grandfather was a farmer, so you can imagine extremely modest background, and then slowly, gradually moving to Mumbai, and then from there to Dubai, and then now we are going global. So obviously, that vision is very big, but it is the prayers of my elders and the support of our team members that keeps me going and motivated, and to see where we can take this. Um, what also really helps is being in Dubai, because Dubai itself is so inspiring, the leadership, that you think, you know what, you kind of feel obligated that you can't let it down. So, Emirati brand going to the world.
Absolutely. Looking again, I guess, at that legacy, thinking of maybe something from your grandfather or from your uncle, who I know was a mentor to you. What are some of the lessons, sort of insights, wisdom that you've taken from them and applied to your own life and to the business?
So the one thing that I learned from, and I used to hear it when I was little from my grandfather, and as I grew, I uh, was taught by my father and my uncles. My youngest uncle was my mentor, and he was the nose of the family. He taught me, God bless his soul. Um, and they all said one thing. They said, "Do not compromise on the product just to reduce the price or keep a price at stable. Increase the price, but make sure that your product never gets affected." So I'll state an anecdote. My grandfather was sitting with a very notable late sheikh, and they used to joke at times. Well, not my grandfather; he didn't like jokes much, but the people in the majlis were like, "Ajmal, we hear that you're selling all this rubbish and everything." And he responded, he said, "Tell those people to throw the goods in the sea and come and take the money back." So that was the kind of confidence. And he obviously answered in a lot of seriousness, but that showed how confident he is about the wares at that time. And that's the one lesson which is absolutely ingrained within us. Apart from that is charity, people care. So always do work or do businesses that give jobs. So even in our factory, if you ever came, and I would love for you to come and visit us, you'll see that the machinery are not entirely automated. So where you could see automation could have been done by two people, there's still 12, let's say. So it is how you give back to the community. These are two tenets of our the values that we have really learned from our parents, from grandparents, and hopefully we will be able to pass it down to the next generations.
I mean, is there ever any tension with that, though? I mean, that's, I think, very admirable, the description you had of in the factory with, having, not automating perhaps as much as you could. Do you ever find that there's tension though within the business of saying, well, we obviously need to optimize, we should prioritize profits, or do you think that it sort of bears out in the long term in terms of the goodwill, in terms of the positive sentiment, PR perhaps that you get for the company?
We truly believe, I think we're quite sentimental and spiritual at the same time. We believe it's that kind of an effort, what we do for people comes back in terms of success. Alhamdulillah, in the 75 years of our existence, apart from the COVID period, Alhamdulillah, Ajmal has never seen a decline in business. And we've been growing not just perfumery, in other areas as well. Of course, there have been failures, but there's never been a decline as such. So I believe that it actually comes back to you. Of course, when we sit as professionals, we look at things like, okay, can we cut costs? But rather than that, we see, okay, how do you absorb everything and how do you motivate your people to grow the business? Because the world is a really, really big place still. So we're big in GCC, alhamdulillah. We're known in India, we're known in the Far East, but still we have to capture markets of the Europe, of Americas. So I think it's going to be a while before we start thinking about, cutting costs in that manner.
Well, I mean, I guess that's good to hear.
And if we get a CFO who wants to do that, maybe his should be the first one to go.
Well, good. Starting with the C-suite makes sense.
Yeah,
So I wanted to take a step back to look at Ejmal's journey with the UAE in particular. I believe the first store was opened in 1976 in
that's correct.
Murshid
Yes.
Bazaar. What have you heard of that time, that experience? Why was the decision taken at that time to enter the UAE market? And any personal anecdotes maybe that you've heard from your family?
So this is very interesting. I mean, the story is very interesting. At that time, my grandfather initially used to deal mostly with the Saudis and Kuwaitis who used to come to India, predominantly textiles, spices, perfumes. So one would think that you would end up opening shop in these countries because you're familiar with your clients are there. So when my grandfather started traveling the Khalij, coming, you see, at that time, business was you took your wares, you went to customers where they were, and then you meet with the customers, and then you transact. Payment happens later. That's how it was. What today big brands call it trunk sales, and that was exactly what it was. It was in big trunks. So when he used to do the travels, he used to come, and at that time, I'm sure you would know this from your family as well. The shuyukh, you could have a face to face with them, and the late Sheikh Rashid, God bless his soul, and late Sheikh Zayed as well. He used to sit with them, listen to their vision, and especially Sheikh Rashid used to talk about his vision about. Jabal Ali Free Zone, a tall building where all these big companies will be, which ended up Trade Center, things like that. So when it was time to open a store shop in Dubai, he sent my uncle, who's the second son. He said, "Go to Dubai. I have tremendous belief in the vision of this city, of this country. I think this is where we should start." And alhamdulillah, that's exactly how we started. We started with the first store in Dubai. We opened the 100th store in Dubai. And inshallah, I hope soon enough we should open the 500th store over here.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Um, so I think we're talking about again those early years,
Yeah.
from 1976 onto I think 1986 is when you had the first manufacturing.
87.
87. Thank
87
you.
was the first factory.
87. Thank you. Um, Again, I'd love to know sort of what happened in those intervening years because you have a shop that makes sense. Obviously, you had the inspiration, the vision. I imagine sales were doing very well at the time. But then, how do you make that pivot to be like, not only are we going to have a retail presence here, but this is potentially where we could have a base, where we could manufacture, where we could, sort of grow our business.
Yep. So it's like any other business, right? You reach a point and then you say, what next? There can be two parts to sort of contribute to that. One is as an entrepreneur, you think what is next what is better I can offer the consumer. And then the other way is the consumer demand in the market. So You have to take look at the timeline. My grandfather started as a trader of oud and oud. Then, when he came to Mumbai, he started processing what we call Indian attars like saffron and ward and motia and things like that. Those oils then started selling over here. Then the concept of khaltat. So then there was the mixing. One of my uncles, who was trials and error and learned from the Arabs who were coming, because there was a lot of learning both ways. So once they started making the khaltat, then that became the go-to product. Right? I'm making it very simple, putting a
Sure.
huge timeline in a short place. Of course, all this happened in literally decades. Once that started happening earlier, the first store was all about the oils. It was either the mono oils or the khaltat that were created, and then the consumers liked that. Many a times they gave their own ideas. We did testing as well. And that was a time when you worked directly with the big families, with a lot of people who understood. Arabs have always had a great sense for fragrances. So you would get a lot of inputs from the consumer. And being a retailer, that's the best thing. You're talking directly to the consumer. So you get a lot of input from them. And that's therefore products are created. That's when we reached a point when we said, what next? And that's when the world had, or for us, the world had just opened up for all the branded perfumes in Dubai, sprays. So we didn't know much about that. We were still in the oil age at that time, concentrates,
And what
khaltat.
year is this?
This would be around the 80s, mid 80s. So that's when my father and my uncle decided, you know what, we need to have a small setup and let's now move forward. And it wasn't about competition at that time. So for example, today a lot of the competition also pushes you.
Hmm.
At that time it wasn't so much the competition, it was what can we do next to improve the business. By that time there are already a couple of stores that opened up outside of Dubai as well. So the idea was to one was to come with new products for the consumers, perhaps even in new formats like let's say an EDP format. And the other thing was we also moved a lot of the oud processing over here. Earlier, it was all about getting it done, or the processing was done in India, it was done in the Far East, and it was imported. Then we realized, no, you know what? Let's do some of the processing over here. And that's how the first factory came about.
And why did it make sense to do the processing over here at that time?
We felt that having our own manufacturing also, our customers were some of the best people to give you the inputs. They would come to the factory, they would have a look at how things are done. Uh, it was also the place where they could really evaluate authenticity. You're saying you're getting the goods, but here I can see it. And Ajmal has always been a name that was associated with trust. Even today, we have done a market research and we said, what's the one word that defines Ajmal? And it's trust. So I believe that at the end of the day, of course, it's because they did that, we are seeing this kind of growth. They were also visionaries. I mean, they're still visionary. My father is still in business. My uncle is active, alhamdulillah. But they saw that the future is going to be you manufacture your goods. That was at that time. It wasn't just about trading anymore. Now we look at brand building, for example. That is far more important. For me, my vision is how do I take the brand outside rather than just manufacturing.
Why do you think in this particular time that brand building is really what Ajmal or just anyone should be focused on? And I guess how are you conceptualizing that as part of your tenure as CEO?
So I always believe in this line. I coined it. I don't know, maybe many have before me. People don't last, organizations do. Similarly, products don't last, brands do. Look at all the brands today, they've lasted predominantly because of the brand value. And the ones that have really gone down or completely bankrupt is because of the brand value or they did not change with the times. But changing with the times also means that you're keeping your brand relevant, right? Without relevance, there is nothing.
So you don't think it's a dip in the quality of the product? You think it's a branding issue?
It's always a branding issue, but the quality of product has to remain consistent because as we move forward, look, trust at one time was I told you, Amar, this is the top. You believe me, and that's the end of it. But today, there are government regulations, there are compliances, there are labs that we do testing for so many. We won't name a few people, very big people who get gifts, and they just want to be sure that they're getting what they've been told. So there are so many things that one needs to look at. Things The world has changed completely. Opinions. Look at social media. All it takes is one bad comment, and then you've got a whole spate of snowballing of all sorts of comments, and so and it all affects your brand at the end of the day. You've got hundreds of products. We have got over 300 references, let's say, right? But just one mistake could really, really impact the brand. So if a brand is impacted, all the other products are impacted. So what difference does it make if you have brilliant products that you as a consumer have been using for a while? Now you've got this thought in your mind that this brand is taking some shortcuts.
Fair enough. I mean, speaking of, I guess, the brand, right? Oud is certainly something that people associate with Ajmal, both historically and still today. And it used to be, I don't know if unique is the right word, maybe not so much in our region, but certainly internationally, a sort of more unusual fragrance. But now you have a lot of people who are also trying to emulate that sort of
Yeah.
fragrance. I guess again, looking at our modern day today, how as Ejmel do you maintain that association with oud, the uniqueness of the specific, odor and smell and the perfumes that you guys produce? How do you sort of maintain that competitive edge when a lot of other companies internationally are also trying to emulate that kind of fragrance?
So let me start by saying something quite pompous. All right. But it wasn't something that we came up with. It was the customer that would always tell us. And they would always, for decades, they would say Malik al Oud. Ajmal Malik al Oud. So we now own that term. And we said, yeah, king of oud. You know what? We are the king of oud. So just to share with you, Amar, we are the biggest oud buyers, traders, consumers in the world and sellers.
Bar none.
There is no, I mean, the second would be a very, very distant second. So um, we have been consuming the oud. We Now let me actually talk about a little bit about something that has started. So a trend today is sustainability. 1979, there was no sustainability, right? We started our plantation at that time because the family realized, look, we're only felling trees. Nobody's growing them. And these things take 30 years, 40 years to grow. So at least our children, grandchildren will benefit. Today, alhamdulillah, we've got over 10 million trees of our own. So we were the first ones to start the plantation. We did so much research in the oud category that we've got patents in 7 countries for artificial inoculation of oud. Nobody else does. People do follow that now, of course. Once you patent, it's all out, and other people do it as well. But we've got the patents for the processes that we've come up with. Our own R&D has come up with it. We have guided regulations how to look at oud. Formulations goes without saying. We are the premier supplier of oud, authentic oud, to the biggest brands in the world, the biggest houses, right? I would even go to the point of saying 95% of oud, which is actually used in international perfumery, is sold by us. As far as when it goes to international brands coming into this, I think it is a boon because until 2006, 2007, oud was pretty unknown in the Western world, for example. And more importantly, whenever they interacted with oud, it was too strong for them. So oud as a concept, just the name oud was used for the not for the first time, but it started gaining popularity in 2006, 2007. But that opened the world for us. So I see it as an opportunity.
Well, I guess speaking of globally, Ajmal is, I think, currently is it 45
Yeah,
countries?
about.
About. Um, do you think again that is because of the more recent proliferation of oud as a concept, of the type of fragrances that obviously you specialize in as being desirable to different markets? And how do you select where to enter? Are you just looking for places that don't really have a presence or that have interest in other perfumes? Do you look for places that have a taste that aligns maybe with the type of work you're doing? What are you looking for there?
So it's a mixed bag of all these strategies that you just talked about, right? So you look at the low hanging fruit first. So you look at markets that have a good acceptance of, let's say, strong fragrances. And let me use the example of South America. So Latinos like strong fragrances. In the US, Black Americans like strong fragrances. So these are areas you want to target at the as much as possible at the earliest. Of course, there is also the thing that you present yourself in some of the most prestigious exhibitions. So there's one happening at the end of September. It is the travel retail exhibition in Cannes. It is the biggest in the world, and we're the only ones from the region who are there. There are others who come on and off. But if you look at the travel retail, if somebody said, "How do you know you have gone global?" We are in 65 travel retail destinations. We're on 12 airlines. So we are competing. We're the only people from the brand from this region that is competing with all the big brands. So coming back to how do you identify? So one, you try and find where the similarities are. Number two, this is where the factory comes into handy, because if I find there is a, let's say the Far East, let's example Far East. Their taste is extremely soft fragrances, nothing too strong. Rather than going to others and doing trials, etc., I can do 1,000 bottles of something and then launch it in the market and see the market response, right? And we will try and target their taste. So the beauty has been that we're not, as much as I'm proud that I'm a Khaliji brand and I'm an Emirati brand, we are a global fragrance house. So we do anything from the softest fragrances all the way to the darkest Arabic Khaliji fragrances. I don't like calling it Arabic fragrances or Middle Eastern fragrances because it is specifically a Khaliji trade.
What is, into your mind, what defines a specifically Khaliji fragrance?
Khaliji fragrances, the way I define, or like we define it, is that they're darker fragrances. They tend to be more heavy. And if I had to describe it if you had to visualize it in your mind, a typical fragrance, and you can read it anywhere online, is a pyramid, right? So you've got the top. So the top part remains on your skin, let's say, for the first 2 to 3 minutes. Then you've got the heart, which lasts for, let's say, another couple of hours, which really starts building the fragrance. And then you've got the base, which hopefully should last for the next 6, 7 hours or whatever number of hours it lasts. Arabic fragrance or Khaliji fragrances are typically, in our mind, or we describe it as cylindrical. They have a very strong structure where the base also contributes to the top. So you can see it all the way through. Now, the restriction of Khaliji fragrances are that you can't bring about too many notes in this. It's very restrictive. But the good thing about it is that there is immense richness in that, because the kind of raw materials you have to use, especially our Khaliji clientele, they know that these are precious ingredients. You know, you guys start wearing fragrances from, I don't know, 8 years. Right now, we've launched a range of kids' fragrances, and alhamdulillah, is doing very, very well, right? So kids start wearing fragrances in this region when they're like 6. uh, so your knowledge and your ability to recognize really good and precious ingredients is much higher than your counterparts, right? So all of these things makes the Khaliji perfumery that much richer. And that's the reason why the Western world or the international perfumery are able to charge a premium by putting the word oud in it. Because the oud, everybody knows, is they call it liquid gold. So that's the whole point. But where they've missed out is, what about all the other liquids that are very precious, that is typically used in the Khaliji world, and still have not entered properly into mainstream perfumery. But we've been using it since decades.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about your individual story when it comes to the family business. Uh, do you recall the first time you started working with a family business? And when I say working, I don't necessarily mean as a job. Perhaps you were there after school. Perhaps you interacted with your father, your uncle, your grandfather at the business, and what that day or that period was like.
So again, anecdotal. I can say I started working with Ajmal when I started walking. No, I'm serious, and I'll tell you why. So at that time, a bunch of us used to stay in one apartment in a place in Bombay. And when granddad and dad and all used to get the consignment of food, a lot of it used to be kept at home because there was no warehouse to keep it. And they would put it for grading what we call the hall, which is now we call living room. And then, the family members, including the women of the family, would also help out doing some grading. And so when I was little and I started walking, one day I picked up a piece of food and I sucked on it, right? And I broke into a rash. So that's the first time I interacted with oud. There's nothing wrong with oud. It was just that I was sensitive to it. And that was the reason why I broke into a rash. So my interaction was, so they would put the oud on the floor. They would start grading it because oud comes in a big pile. So you have to grade it under A quality, B quality, C quality. And I was just learned walking around, so I was playing around and everything. And I picked up a piece of oud and I started sucking on it. And my grandfather noticed that, and he made it into like a pendant, and he put a rope through it and made me wear it for a while. So I did wear oud for a while. So you can
Did
say
you
that
did
my
you
first.
select a high graded piece of oud? Were you
Nobody ever
discerning
told
at a
me.
young
No,
age?
I don't know that. That I don't know. What I do know is that I was sucking on it and just playing with oud, etc. I mean, as a kid, what do I know? But it was really precious. Unfortunately, I don't know why or how it got lost, but that would have been a real, I would call it an heirloom if I could have it and pass it on to my kids. So that was the first time I interacted or, let's say, worked with our business. And the other thing I always tell people that I've got perfumery in my blood, and I mean it literally. Now, what does that mean? At that time, when granddad used to and dad and all used to get saffron has to be stored in a cool place. If you keep it outside, it starts getting bugs and these insects and stuff. So that time, we just first time we got a fridge. Wow, cold water. Okay, in a place like Bombay, so we used to keep water in the fridge and they used to store the saffron in the fridge as well. So for the longest time, I drank water laced with saffron. Now, many people might think, oh, wow, that is so majestic. Trust me, it's not. When you're drinking it for years and years, it's not. So it's in my system, literally. I love saffron even now, but I'm not
I
so
mean, I
sure I
like it
would
in
want to.
tea. I don't know
Sorry.
about water.
Yeah, I mean, tea, yes. I would definitely have it. We do have it every day, but not so sure about water anymore.
I suppose anything you have every day will get a little old
Oh,
after a while.
definitely.
Yeah, of course. How does one become a master perfumer, or how do you learn that specific trade? And when you are trying to conceptualize something new, I mean, you mentioned listening to your customers. Obviously, that's a part of it. But how do you try to come up with those new fragrances that are really going to capture someone's attention?
So, first of all, let me tell you how a person becomes a perfumer. And the easiest way to understand this is think of how does one become a chef. It's an apprentice based business. You can go to a university and learn about perfumery. You can learn about the chemistry of perfumery. You can learn about all of those things. But after graduation, you still work under somebody who is going to train you how it's done. It's the same thing with people in culinary school. Regardless what you do, you start at the bottom if you really want to be a good chef. You can always start off somewhere. And, I asked a master perfumer, God bless his soul, he passed away last year, that how do you know when you become a perfumer? He said, when you sell your first perfume. That's it. But how do you know? How do you become a good perfumer? Very, very, very few people do it entirely on their own. Over the years, of course, over the centuries, they had to. There was no such thing. So they've learned it on their own. Today, there are people that are master perfumers who take on young perfumers. So you go get a job with one of the big houses, or you might even get a job in a company like ours where we hire perfumers. We have fragrance design managers. And then they start learning from their way up. So, like in a kitchen, they'll start with chopping the onions. Here, we start with learning the ingredients. So, when I came back from England after my MBA, it was painful because my uncle would make me smell the same ingredient every morning for a week at least. And he would say, write down what you smell and what are the emotions. And over a period of time, you start realizing that you are identifying new things every day on the same thing. So that is a process. And then you start doing a little bit of blending. Then you start doing a little bit of, uh, first you do is try and recreate fragrances that are available. Now I'm talking about industry, how it works, not so much how we do, because we also work collaboratively with the big houses. They first, before the newcomer is moved up, normally their bosses will try them out. They will put, uh, let's say, I don't know, some sort of a challenge to them, or a fragrance that is a classic, let's say. How would you create it if you were to create it while you retain the essence of it? That's what they do. Then they start getting into the practice to work with the perfumer. They start giving their opinions on let's say, the briefs that the perfumer is working on, and they will share the senior will share it with the junior and get them to also contribute. They might even give them a little assignment that, the brief is such. Why don't you take a little part of it and see if you can do it? So if the brief might say we're looking for a fragrance which is, let's say, fresh at the top, heart needs to be very floral but opulent, and the base needs to be very sensual.
When you say that, it sounds like I would have no idea where to start.
Well, mostly we don't either. Okay. But when you start and you start imagining, so two things one has to imagine. One is the consumer, because when you get a good brief, the brief should also talk about the consumer. Who's the consumer? What does the consumer like to do? How do they dress? What kind of strata of society do they come from? What is their background like? Second thing you want to think about is you have to think about what are the kind of raw materials that could really answer the question of the brief. So as I was telling you the earlier when we were chatting about this exhibition for weddings we went to in India, we could talk about only four predominant flowers, because the way the fragrances or the attire in Indian weddings, we had to match it with the fragrances that would really go with it.
So
So for example,
you're
we didn't talk
also
about oud.
right.
No oud in
Because it
India.
didn't match the clothing or
The
the
clothing. So we
feeling.
talked about fresh florals, rich florals, things like jasmine and ylang and rose de mai. So it was something, these are unique fragrances, very opulent, but they are not as intensive as the dark Khaliji fragrances. But if I did the same masterclass in UAE, for example, oud had to be there. No, there's no question. Okay, very, very high-end Indian word would be there. Zafran would be there. So you have to really modulate according to the customer. At the end of the day, customer is king. I mean, they are the ones who dictate everything, right?
Well, let's pick up on that because I know you've had some, I think, interesting ideas with technology, both in terms of AI,
Yeah.
sort of helping to conceptualize perfume for an individual or help with their needs, or also even DNA coming into it. Can you tell me a little bit about sort of how you see potentially some of those future opportunities? And also, like you mentioned, like people are also concerned about AI potentially taking jobs away. You talked
Yeah.
about how important
Yeah.
it was to have the physical workers at your factory in terms of the ethos of the business. So
Yeah.
how do you balance those two things?
So we haven't reached that place where we're having to balance it. But my what I visualize for the future is a couple of things. One is, and it's already happening, by the way, there are organizations that have AI tools that will create an entire formulation. But the formulation, as of today, still needs to be tweaked by a senior perfumer, because obviously it's all on data, right? And emotions and likes and dislikes are not data. But over a period of time, with the whole idea of machine learning, etc., it will get there where I believe chances are that what happens to the perfumers? What about young perfumers? What about aspiring perfumers? Will there be an opportunity for them? We will see. It's in the future. We don't know where it goes, how it will be.
I mean, you
But
talked about how perfume, like being a perfumer, is an art, right?
it is.
Like, so how do you see? I can see a machine or the AI being able to maybe suggest some options, but do you think it will be able to actually conceptualize new fragrances?
What it will do is it will train the consumer's mind to like what they are trying to create. I would put it that way. Now, what I mean by that is today, you are a creator, you've created something. I don't know what I want. Most consumers actually don't know what they want. They typically pick something that will relate to something else. It's only very, very few absolute creations that people smell and they go, wow, this is different. And this is, it comes in a decade now. Earlier, it used to be still, much better. What it does actually is takes all the formulations. So I'll give you an example. It takes the formulations of all the fragrances that have been extremely successful in the Khalij. Then what it does is looks at all the common elements, right? And then it looks at some of the briefs, who are the consumers, etc. Then it matches them and it creates a fragrance. So if you think about it, it should actually succeed, right? Because it has all the elements of success. But a company who's done that has done two fragrances, a brand has done that, and they both failed. But having said that, normally these sort of technology based things tend to fail when you're starting up, but it will do it. The difference is that it will only keep working on things that has been there in the past. It will never have, maybe it will never have the creativity for the future because it's always working on data rather than creativity, which is really looking forward and saying, okay, this is what I think should be the next thing, right? If AI was there 30 years ago, I'm fairly confident oud wouldn't have come out to the modern world or the Western world, I should say,
So you
right?
think it would
Yeah, but
reinforce
it's
patterns?
the same thing. However, having said that, and I hope I see the day within a span of, I don't know, I might be wrong, but I think it might be within a decade where I see a store where you walk in, it's not very big, let's say 200 square feet, and there is nothing there except these little thumbprint areas and like biometric type things. You just go there, you put your thumb on it, and there is a reader that reads your DNA. And then in the back of it, the machines are there which create, let's say, 3 or 5 formulations immediately on the basis of your DNA. And they give you, let's say, tester samples. And then you test it out and then you order it, most likely online, which probably gets delivered by, I don't know, a drone or something. Yeah, who knows? So I actually see this is a reality happening. And honestly, I personally would like to see if Ajmal would be the one to work on something like this. We are working on many technologies already with partners in the US, in Europe as well. And let's see, of course, a lot of them are failures because that's what happens with technology. But we are keen to see, inshallah, what can come out of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we'll all find out. I mean, there's certainly many things you said that I think are very interesting. Many potentially a bit frightening as well, but
Well,
that's the balance of AI.
absolutely.
Um, Looking at your professional career, I'm curious, reflecting on it. What was, say, a mistake that you made, or maybe an error that you felt like you learned the most from? We obviously all have them, right?
Yeah. So the first thing, I think, but I don't know if it can be called a mistake, but it's something, it's an opportunity lost for sure, is being the eldest. I immediately after my education, I came and joined the business. I think I should have given myself a couple of years, 3 years to work in independent, non-family business, somebody who doesn't know who I am. There, the learning possibilities would have been far more. And as one of my professors used to say, for family businesses, it's the wear and tear. You should do it somewhere else. So that would have been a good experience. I would have learned a lot more faster because let's face it, I mean, your first boss actually makes your career. And if you're lucky enough to have a very good boss, you learn far more faster, a lot more challenging. So, yes, I'm very fortunate that I came back to, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but I could have learned, let's say, 10 years of working within, let's say, 3 years if I worked outside first. So that was the first thing. And I think it was a lost opportunity. It was an emotional decision that I made. And I would always tell people whenever somebody says, what would you tell a family business young person? I always say, go and work away from the family for at least a good 3 years, 5 years, and then join the business. You can bring in a lot more productivity. You can bring in a lot more infusion of ideas when you come in.
Well, I
The
mean, the family aspect of it, I think, is always interesting. And I wanted to, when you work so closely with family, when you've grown up, in generations of a family business, I imagine it sometimes is difficult to separate the personal from the professional. Is that something that you found yourself? I mean, you talked about, it would have been nice to have that time away, obviously for knowledge, but also in terms of your own individual sort of hopes and enterprises. Is it hard to balance sometimes?
Well, it's a bit like the whole Islamic teaching that we have. We always go back to what you don't know, Allah knows, right? So I don't know what it could have been. It could have been a disaster. It could have been so good that I never would have joined the family business, right? So I really don't know. So I think of it that, look, whatever happens, alhamdulillah, it happens for the good. But when it comes to this thing about the family that you talked about, my family, I'm very, very fortunate, are very progressive in the way they do everything and run the family and the business. Very early on, so I went to a course in 2001 for family businesses. Now you see them everywhere. But that time there was only two universities. One was IMD, one was Harvard. I went to IMD Lausanne. And we learned a few things that at that time was very new, but very large family businesses had already started doing it. So there was this thing called family mandate, family business governance, which now is very common with a lot of family businesses. So I came back and I gave a presentation to the board, my family members, and by 2004, we had a family governance in place, which is legal, it's mandated, everybody has to follow. That's your rule book. It has rules for everything. How do you join the business? How do you leave the business? How do you want to exit? You want to buy out? You want to sell out? Absolutely everything, right? One of the things that it is not written in the manual, but is a practice within our family, is that the son or daughter of a respective patriarch will never get will never work under them. They have to get trained either under a different family member or a non-family member. That way, the bias is out. So we've been doing that for the last 28 odd years. My father is very strict when it comes to work. Uh, Again, being the eldest, he always had huge responsibilities. Still does. Feels responsible for absolutely everything. Always has the weight of the world on his shoulders. Has always been very, very tough on me and my brother, but mostly me because I was the eldest. So you always beat the crap out of the eldest, right? The others get it easy. So, and it's good for you. It's actually very good for you. Tough love is very important. And I think that has really helped me a lot. What also helped me is that I call myself two and a half generation. Because when I joined, so I've been in the business 28 years, my uncles and my father was active, absolutely active in the business. My grandfather was spiritually active in the business. So they would go and ask his guidance and what have you, but he was not operational. He would come in the shops and sit there because he was always a shopkeeper. So he would enjoy that in the evenings. But so he would give that kind of guidance. But well, fortunately or unfortunately, so I got to learn everything. I started with my uncle in perfumery. I went to sat in the shops. I did the back end work. I was in manufacturing. I was in supply chain. I've done. I've gone to shops inside UAE, selling to retailers, listening to their complaints, listening to them tell me how bad things are, and and when it's a customer, you can't say anything, right? So I was fortunate enough to listen to all that. It built character, so that you don't think, oh, I'm an Ajmal, how can I listen to this crap from this guy or whoever. But that gives you that patience, that you have to deal with these situations. And then, so I was able to, so I'm today, I would say I'm a perfumist. I'm not a perfumer. I'm not an entire, but I'm jack of all trades. I can manage. I know what happens where. Alhamdulillah, I've learned it. My cousins, or even my brother for that matter, have never had that opportunity, because when they joined, they were given a quick training, let's say about a year or so that they understand different segments of the business. But eventually, they had to just stick to one function that they chose, interested them most, right? So, for example, my brother now is the head of supply chain, so he knows supply chain. One of my cousins very is all about oud and then oud, so he's training under dad, right? He only his thing is all about oud and then oud, and he's really good at it as well. He's only been in the business 15 years, but oud and then oud is another thing. It's all about every day, every day, every day. You got to do the same thing. So for them, it's like they had to choose one thing and stick to it. Today, alhamdulillah, I am in a position. Today, the board, I was very fortunate that my family, the board made me CEO. Perhaps partly is also because this guy has got a view of the entire running of the business, whereas the others don't. But I would encourage other members of my family as well. Tomorrow, inshallah, I would be more than happy to pass on the mantle to somebody else, even if they're much younger than me. But if I see that this guy, cousin, brother, sister, can take the business far ahead, better than me, I would be more than happy to pass on the mantle. But for that, I would charge a commission.
Of course, you gotta, that's the businessman in you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Abdullah, that was a lovely sentiment to end on. Thank you so much for being with us on Homegrown. It was such a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you so much for having me. And really, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.